You're listening to the Sex Addicts Recovery Podcast, a place for sex addicts to share their experiences of recovery, to help break the stigma, myths, and misconceptions of sex addiction. This podcast may contain topics of sexuality, sexual trauma, dysfunction, or other things that may be triggering, so listener discretion is advised. Hello and welcome to the Sex Addicts Recovery Podcast. My name is Jason, I'm a sex addict, and I will be your podcast host for today. What's going on, everybody? Welcome to episode number 59 of the Sex Addicts Recovery Podcast. This week I'm excited to share a conversation that I had with Darren F from Texas. Over his years in SAA, Darren has been involved in many levels of service and is currently the chair of the 12 Concepts Committee. And dating back to October of last year, Darren emailed me about spreading the word here on the podcast about the 12 Concepts. And instead of just talking about the 12 concepts, we thought it would be a nice idea just to get to know Darren. Again, like with many other guests, I asked him about his circles and how he got into the program, and then finally into service. And that's where we started talking about the 12 concepts. So a lot of you, like myself, aren't fully aware of just what the 12 concepts are. Many of us probably know what the 12 steps and the 12 traditions of SAA are, but the lesser known part of the 36 spiritual principles is the 12 concepts. And I thought before getting into the conversation that I'd pick out a few readings. The first is from the Green Book of SAA, and this is on page 75 about service. And then I will be reading the actual 12 concepts of service. So from page 75. We depend on each other to stay sexually sober, and SAA depends on our service to keep functioning. Service in SAA ranges from one-on-one outreach over a cup of coffee to the worldwide outreach performed by the International Service Organization, which is the ISO. Helping keep SAA running is an extension of carrying our message of recovery. Our voluntary efforts are essential to the success of the fellowship and the recovery of every sex addict who is part of it. Personal service, one addict helping another, is the most essential way we carry our recovery message. We perform this type of service whenever we greet newcomers or listen to someone in the fellowship who needs to talk. We may sponsor others in the program, visit or write to addicts in jail or in prison, or be available to take phone calls from members who are reaching out. In all cases, we share our experience and offer support. The paradox is that service helps us to stay sexually sober ourselves, regardless of the benefit that others may receive from us. We've learned that the best insurance against relapse is helping another sex addict. In addition to personal service, we provide general services that help to keep our groups functioning. These services include finding places to meet, providing public information and outreach, and producing and distributing literature. We need trusted servants and committee members at every level, from the officers of our local groups to the delegates we send to the International Convention, to the representatives and staff serving us at the ISO. All of these efforts require the voluntary financial contributions of SAA members and groups. Our local meeting is the foundation of our personal recovery. Without a healthy and well-run meeting, the recovery of every member is threatened. Each group needs trusted servants to perform the tasks necessary to keep the meeting available to all. Some of the tasks trusted servants perform include chairing the meeting, ordering the literature, answering letters to the P.O. box or calls to the telephone line, collecting donations and paying rent. A group may hold business meetings on a regular basis or as needed in order to elect trusted servants to make the decisions necessary for running the meeting smoothly. Our local meeting is also the foundation of the SAA service structure. Through our local meetings, we have a voice in SAA as a whole. Our groups send delegates to the annual International Convention. The delegates bring the decisions and concerns of their local groups to bear on matters affecting SAA as a whole. In this way, we each contribute to the decision-making process of the entire fellowship. We rely on our higher power for guidance in all our deliberations. And I know that was a lot, and I will stop there. And in that reading, just as I'm thinking about it, this was written before we split the International Convention and the annual conference. And Darren and I discussed that in our conversation. So we do talk about the service structure of SAA, from the local meeting to intergroup to areas and area assembly, group service representatives, delegates to the conference, and how the ISO works. But yeah, just in this reading here, knowing the conversation that I had and what the 12 concepts of service are, I can see how it applies to the few paragraphs that I read. So a little upfront here before I read these concepts. Some of it can sound a little bit verbose. I just wanted to make sure that I read them here on the podcast before talking to Darren, so we can have an understanding of exactly what it is that we're talking about during our conversation. He does read off quite a few of them and how they apply. But anyway, here are the 12 concepts of service. I found these on the SAA website, which is saa-recovery.org, going to SAA info, and then news. And this is the draft version of the 12 concepts of service. So this has not been formally approved by the conference yet. Like the 12 steps of SAA and the 12 traditions of SAA, both of those were adapted from the 12 steps and 12 traditions of Alcoholics Anonymous. In our conversation, we do talk about the fact that we couldn't really quite copy over the 12 concepts of world service from AA because the service structure is different in SAA. So anyway, I'd like to go ahead and read the 12 concepts of service. And this was approved as of September of 2021 by the Concept Committee, which Darren is the chair of. Concept 1. The final responsibility and ultimate authority for SAA service rests in the informed group conscience of the fellowship. Concept 2. The SAA member groups delegate to their service boards and committees the authority necessary to fulfill their assigned responsibilities. The groups empower the conference to be the active voice and effective conscience of the whole fellowship. Concept 3. Each service entity in SAA is granted the right of decision within the scope of the defined authority entrusted to that entity to make effective leadership possible. Concept 4. Our traditional right of participation ensures effective decision-making on the basis of group conscience at all levels and is key to harmony in service work. Concept 5. Throughout the SAA service structure, there is a traditional right of appeal, which encourages clear processes for the consideration of minority opinion for handling grievances. Concept 6. The conference acknowledges and empowers the Board of Trustees to hold the primary responsibility for fiduciary, legal, and administrative actions of the International Service Organization. Concept 7. The bylaws of the International Service Organization is a legal instrument empowering the Board of Trustees to manage and conduct international service. The conference charter is not a legal document. It relies for its effectiveness upon the spirituality of our program, the principles of our traditions, and the willingness of groups and members to make financial contributions. Concept 8. Our service structure depends on the transparent communication throughout the fellowship, drawing on the spiritual principles of openness, acceptance, inclusivity, and mutual respect. Concept 9. Effective leaders in our organization exemplify servant leadership at every level. While operational leadership of the ISO must be assumed by the Board of Trustees, well-chosen leaders with sound leadership qualities are essential at all levels of SAA service. Fair and appropriate methods of selecting those leaders are indispensable to the functioning of our fellowship. Concept 10. The authority and responsibility for each service task needs a well-defined scope, a single point of decision, and mechanisms for accountability. In this way, duplication of effort is avoided, while at the same time, service committees are responsible for keeping those they serve informed of their work. Concept 11, the Board of Trustees of the International Service Organization, and by extension the administration of the ISO, should always be assisted by the best possible standing committees, executives, staff members, and consultants. Serious care and consideration will always be given to the qualifications, selection, rotation, authority, and responsibility of all volunteer and appointed committee members, and to the duties, selection, and compensation of all paid staff members. And finally, Concept 12, which is a long one. The conference warrants that the voice of the fellowship is vital to the sustained health and integrity of SAA, and that in order to accomplish that goal, the conference hereby commits to the principles contained in the 11 preceding concepts and to the following additional affirmations. The conference shall at all times and in all decisions keep its focus on the spiritual principles of the SAA program of recovery and avoid any actions that are financially or politically motivated. The conference shall, in principle, support the ISO in maintaining sufficient operating funds and appropriate reserves to meet unanticipated special needs or crises, taking care that it never becomes the seat of perilous wealth or power. Within the conference, unity of the fellowship and equality of all members stands paramount in the consideration of all issues. Our leaders are but trusted servants, they do not govern. At all levels within the conference, thorough discussion of all issues should precede voting, and substantial unanimity is always the desired goal. Insofar as possible, the conference should avoid open controversy. Further, the actions of the conference, the International Service Organization, and its components should never be personally punitive. In consideration of the spiritual principles of the SAA program of recovery, the conference should never attempt to engage in acts of government. Whew, that was a mouthful. So, a lot of that seems like legalese to me, and I had a hard time understanding exactly what a lot of that meant. So in our conversation, we talked about the idea of making these concepts personal to the individual who's listening to the podcast and how it can relate to everyday recovery in their home groups and not necessarily on the global stage. So a lot of this can be brought down right to the individual. As a matter of fact, during our conversation a few times, I called them the 12 concepts of world service, as they're called in AA. But Darren reminded me that these are the 12 concepts of service. So we relate a lot of how these concepts of service work in our home groups. For me personally, seeing how it relates to business meetings and how we make decisions, how we select trusted servants at our meetings to be the secretary or treasurer, literature person, and seeing how all of these affect our daily recovery. So, finally, with all of that out of the way, I wanted to turn it over to the conversation that I had with Darren. Here it is, and I hope you enjoy it. All right, you good?
I'm good.
All right, well, cool. This week, I am super grateful to finally get this conversation going. We've been talking about it for months and months. We're having Darren F on the podcast here to talk about the 12 concepts of world service in SAA. Welcome, Darren.
Hey, Jason. Great to be here.
Yeah. So I was thinking back just on our conversations and stuff that I remember getting calls from you way back whenever you were visiting the Bay Area looking for meetings and things that you were going to. I was answering phone calls for our intergroup, and I remember talking, this must have been around 2015 or so, talking about the idea that I was going to be starting a podcast for our intergroup. I don't know if you ever remember that, but
I don't know. It was a great idea, though.
Yeah. Where are you located?
I'm in McKinney, Texas. It's a
Okay.
northern suburb of Dallas, Texas.
Cool. Yeah, I know there have been a couple times where you've been out towards like Monterey and things out here in the Pacific.
Yeah, you've got a great memory, Jason. Sometimes when I talk to folks in the fellowship, I'll put notes in my phone. And so I was looking up under your contact information. And you're right, we've been talking for a number of years.
Yeah.
Not sure if we'd ever met, maybe at a conference one year, but one of the blessings of my job is I get to travel around the country, and I've always enjoyed going to the fellowship wherever I can. And the Bay Area I was going to quite a bit. And so I've been to a bunch of the meetings in the Bay Area, from San Jose and up north to San Francisco, and in wine country up in Napa and Sonoma. So it's been a really cool experience to explore the fellowship over the years.
Nice. One of the things that I usually do here on the podcast is ask about the three circles. It's a great way to kind of introduce our guests to the wider audience, so let them know kind of where you are. Can you share what's in your circles?
Yeah, you bet, Jason. Be happy to. So my sobriety date's November 25 of 2013. And what that means in terms of inner circle, so again, the inner circle for me, it's the spiritual killers. It's the stuff that I need to not do in order to be a sober member of Sex Addicts Anonymous. And so some of the things on that list for me would be no masturbation, no pornography, no voyeurism, exhibitionism, sex outside my committed relationship. I am a married man, and some other things might be the secret life stuff, creating secret accounts, whether it's email or social media type things, restaurants that highlight certain body parts, strip clubs, those types of things. I think that kind of covers the inner circle for me, and just been a great joy. It's just a miracle that I haven't done those things for all those years, thanks to this fellowship and program. In terms of the middle circle, so these are things that I would describe as things I need to continue to watch for, because they speak to my spiritual condition. And so if I find myself doing things like looking at tabloid magazines, because what's in those tabloid magazines but pretty pictures, the social media stuff, looking at people's profiles, those types of things, browsing social media, you need to be really careful about that. Watching reality TV. Again, these are all things that cause me to escape, or I use to escape. Kind of get that almost a little bit of a high from. One of the things I need to be mindful of is drinking when I travel. I don't identify as an alcoholic, but a healthy boundary is no more than one drink with dinner when I'm traveling. I don't drink alone. I don't go to bars. These are all types of things that if I were to do, kind of dangerous for a guy like me. And so again, I'm always looking for the 10-step type of things. If I find myself in the middle circle, it's probably an immediate call to my sponsor, because I'm being selfish, a little bit dishonest and inconsiderate. In terms of outer circle, well, I always have at the top of my list service. We're going to be talking a lot about service, but so I sponsor, I think of steps 10, 11, and 12. Jason, I sponsor a bunch of people. They sponsor people. I have a sponsor, obviously. Steps 10, 11, and 12 as best I can today. I don't have a ton of hobbies, but I'm a father. I've got 2 young boys, so I'm busy with that, taking them out to just trying to be present, hanging out with them, taking them to hockey games, practices, being a dad. Our family enjoys traveling, RV. We're heading up to West Texas to Big Bend this weekend, so that's a great outer circle activity. Just hanging out in the fellowship, getting to know other addicts, being of service. Gardening, love getting outside in the garden out here and those types of things. So
just thinking of gardening. One of my friends here in the Bay Area listens to the podcast while he's out gardening. The other day, it was a couple months ago, he asked, when's a new episode coming out? I'm going to be doing some gardening. I need something to listen to while I'm out there.
That's great. It's listening to 12-step speakers, this podcast. That's kind of how I fill my time when I'm driving and commuting. And it was such a blessing to me, especially early on in recovery. I couldn't get enough of 12-step experience and insights and hope. So, one of the things I love about this podcast, it's getting the experience and hope of sex addicts out there into the world, which we desperately need. There's so much from other fellowships, but it's one of the things I love about your podcast. So.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much. Great circles there. And mentioned before we started recording, if you wanted to do kind of a brief summary of how you got into program and how you got into service in our program.
Yeah, you bet. So I came in November of 2010. First meeting was a meeting in Plano, Texas on a Friday night. And that came as a result of getting in a whole lot of trouble, Jason. I had to be caught. Right? I was never someone who would confess what I was doing. I had to be downright captured, and I was certainly cornered. I had no other alternatives but to seek some help. That seeking started around 2009, and through a course of seeking some professional help. I had never heard of sex addiction. I didn't really know anything about the 12-step community, but through talking to some professionals, getting more and more honest with them, I eventually met one who said, "You know what, Darren, you might be a sex addict." Finally, I was able to give a little bit more of my story. She's like, "Yep, you might benefit from this thing called Sex Addicts Anonymous," and I probably went the next day. So I took some online tests, scored off the charts, right? As my wife's looking over my shoulder. And so I went to Sex Addicts Anonymous. Gosh, and in that room, sitting in a little circle with a couple other sex addicts, I finally felt like I was amongst my people. And I've been blessed with great sponsorship from the beginning. I've had 2 sponsors. And one of the things, Jason, they emphasized from the beginning was obviously the 12 steps. They introduced me to this thing called the 3 legacies: recovery, unity, and service. And so, I'm sure we'll talk about that. But, as soon as I got involved into the steps, my sponsor was basically saying, "All right, Darren, you need a job in this fellowship. You can't just sit here and been a taker. You've been a taker all of your life. So time to start raising your hand and doing stuff. Read the opening and close, facilitate the meeting, get a job," right? So I went through all those iterations of group service, secretary, treasurer, group service rep, intergroup rep. And I loved it because I felt like it made me, I felt a part of it. I felt like this is my group. This is my home group, right? We're going to start on time. We're going to finish on time. And I just loved it. I loved having the responsibility. I remember being a greeter at one of my first meetings, because that's one of the easiest things I could do. Stand at the door and shake hands with everybody who comes in the door, ask them what their name is. And I remember coming back from that meeting, telling my wife, "Hey, I got to be a greeter." People were happy to see me, right?
Nice.
And just a simple act of doing that just made a tremendous impact on me. And so I've been kind of nonstop since then. Some other service. So from the group service to the intergroup chair, DFW, we've got 63 meetings plus or minus. So a pretty big local fellowship. And then from there, I think I started to participate in the intergroup communication committee just as a representative of my home group or my intergroup, and love what the ICC was doing. I know you and I think, have connected over the ICC over the years, and just a great resource for anyone who wants to, again, connect with the broader fellowship. From there, conference steering committee, I attended that just as a curiosity. Again, be careful what you do, because you might be called to do more. Our South Central representative had to step down, and I happened to be on that call, and they're like, "Hey, Darren, we need someone from the South Central region. You want to step up?" And so I was kind of voluntold to do that. And so I've been on the conference steering committee for a number of years, and that turned into participating with the 12 concepts. And again, careful what you ask for. I've been wanting to learn about the 12 concepts, and I didn't have anyone to teach me, and so all of a sudden, wanting to learn about these things, I'm in a position where now I'm the chair of this 12 concept committee. It's like, oh my gosh, really? I've barely even read them before, and here I am trying to navigate this committee through this process. And so it's been really exciting. One of the other service things that I've done is the Public Information and Cooperation with Professional Community, PICPC, and that's been a great committee to be a part of, producing a lot of really neat literature and resources for our fellowship for the last 2 years.
Yeah, the just thinking of PICPC, the amount of work that Philip does, the ISO is amazing. I've used the handbook in terms of what I needed to do and learn to do this podcast, because this is public information this goes out to the public. It is also cooperation with the professional community. We do have therapists that listen to the podcast and turn their clients to either the podcast or to meetings and stuff like that. So it's tremendous service.
It's great. Our fellowship really needs this resource, and it's just a joy to be a part of it. And again, one of the things I love about service is it gets me out of myself, right? It gets me introduced to other sex addicts around the world. These committees that I've been fortunate to participate on are kind of worldwide. The more sex addicts I know, the better off Darren seems to do. And, and with my travel around the world, I get to meet some of these folks, and people take me to lunch, people take me to dinner, or I get to take them out, or they pick me up from the hotel and take me to a meeting, and unbelievable.
That's super cool.
Yeah, I've had a really unique experience with this fellowship based because of my job. I haven't looked at what my number is, but I think it's around 80 to 90 unique Sex Addicts Anonymous meetings around the world, which is just really cool to see.
Yeah. Earlier you were talking about the ICC intergroup communication
committee.
Yeah, at our whenever we have an ICC report at our intergroup, and we always forget exactly what it stands for. But Paul, who was the chair of the ICC, was going to our intergroup, and he and I had been talking. I guess you originally emailed me around. It was late last fall, something like that, about talking about the 12 concepts. And there was some stuff going on with the ICC at the time. And, I mentioned to Paul that this might be a good thing to tackle on the podcast. And so we were trying to get the three of us here together. And I know his work life has been extremely busy recently. So it's been hard to nail him down. It took me quite a few episodes to actually get him here on the podcast. But yeah, I was grateful that we were able to finally get to this and talk about the 12 concepts. So we have, when we talk about the 36, what would you say?
Spiritual principles, right?
Yeah. So the 12 steps, the 12 traditions, and I know those really, really well. But the 12 concepts is something that is relatively new for me. And the information that you gave me, we were able to translate the 12 steps from AA really easily, and the 12 traditions from AA really easily. And it sounded like at first, we've been using the 12 concepts of AA World Service since the inception of the conference that back in the late 80s or something like that.
I guess, right. I guess officially, since we've had the ISO, our bylaws, right? Because the AA concepts, some of them are mentioned in the bylaws. So I guess that's kind of the first formal place that our fellowship would kind of really see those concepts, even though we've probably been practicing them formally, from 1977 to, I can't think of the date that those bylaws first came in, but late 80s, 90 or something. You're not, it's a common story, Jason. Concepts, 12 concepts, what are those, right? And, well, first of all, they're not mentioned in our green book, I don't think.
Yeah, they're not.
Right. Yeah. And so if our literature doesn't mention them, why would I even know about them? So really the folks that seem to know about them are folks that have come from other fellowships. The majority, if not all of the other fellowships, have their own concepts. And one of the things I've loved about this committee, now the committee's been around since 2015, which came as an expression of a conference which said, hey, it's time to consider our own 12 concepts because we're SAA and we're not AA and we're not any of these other fellowships. And, why not have our own, And so, as we talk about these concepts, one of the things, and that first one is the voice of the fellowship. And that voice needs to be expressed and heard and acted on through the various service structure. And so one of the things that happened was a 12 concept committee was created in 2015. And here we are in 2022 and we're getting close. We're not quite there yet, but probably not this conference, but the next conference they'll be presented to the fellowship. We're kind of in a formal review process. And at this last conference, the delegates voted on a method to approve such a document, which basically, to kind of summarize that, would be at least a minimum of 1 year formal review by the fellowship right? So here's the proposed concepts. You've got a year to discuss, give feedback, and then the concept committee through the conference steering committee would, at the end of that year, decide whether to present them for a formal vote or delay another year, right, or more, and until we figure this is the best draft that we have, and then it would take 75% of those delegates at the conference to, with a positive vote to approve such a thing, right? This is a significant document, and so that was the idea. If you ever wanted to change our 12 steps or our 12 traditions, that's kind of the process that we would go through.
So when you mentioned 2015, that was a lot of when the organization was kind of restructuring with the conference. The conference and the convention used to be kind of the same event. The one that we just had, the convention, and it was traditionally Memorial Day weekend every year, rotating different cities around the world. And the convention was more of the speakers and the workshops, and the conference was more of the business aspect. And to my knowledge, previously, each member group can send a delegate to the conference to vote on various things. And then right around 2015, the restructuring from regions to areas restructured a lot. And I got into some of the groundwork on establishing areas, especially here in the Bay Area. The official map that first came out divided the Bay Area into 2 areas, and we were thinking more of 3, possibly 4 areas, and we moved the North Bay into the Northern California area. And so I was wondering if you had any more insight into that and the voice of the fellowship, how we've restructured so each member group can send a group service representative to the area, and then each area sends a delegate to the conference, correct?
Yeah, that's right, Jason. And I think we're on our 3rd. So this October will be the 3rd time where we've sent area delegates only. This is still a kind of an experiment in progress, right? And again, this wasn't a couple people's ideas, right? This was the voice of the fellowship that said, hey, it's time to change from group delegates to area delegates. And that took a couple of years, like you mentioned. But here we are. The voice spoke, and the voice said, we're going to area delegates now. In what was that, 2019?
Yeah. So
2018.
Yeah.
So 19, 2021. No, 2022. 20 and 21 were the first 2. So 2022 will be the 3rd year.
Yeah. 2018 was the first year where the conference split from the convention. I was part of the first convention that was isolated. That was a Bay Area convention. And so the conference where things are voted upon happens now every October, and over in Houston. And so that makes sense because the ISO is based in Houston, and that way they don't have to pack up everyone, and makes a lot more sense to do it that way.
Yeah. And so we're talking about concept 1 here, Jason. I'll just kind of read the proposed concept 1. And again, these can be found on our SAA service website. Maybe we could post some links or something. But the idea is for every group and meeting out there to start to read these and talk about them, because our committee is looking for feedback. But concept 1 in the draft form says this. It says the final responsibility and ultimate authority for SAA service rests with the SAA member groups, as expressed in our informed group conscience. Have a big picture of these concepts, right? We're trying to go from this ideal of this voice of the fellowship to be expressed, but we don't really know how to do that. We want to do that. We see that that's the ideal, right? So, but we need kind of some principles and some guidance to allow that to happen, right? To allow this voice of your home group, of my home group, the members in that group to be expressed. And so we're given these 12 concepts to allow that to happen. It's kind of like the 12 steps, right? I go from powerless and I don't know how to get power, right? And so we get to the rest of these 12 steps to go from powerlessness to a spiritual awakening. And like the traditions, we go from this idea of unity and how we recognize how important that is, but we don't know how to achieve that. And so we're given these 12 traditions to allow us to achieve that unity, right? Here's some things you don't do, and here's some things you do in the traditions to get from unity, the individual, to spiritual anonymity in tradition 12, where it's really not about me, it's about this power bigger. So same thing with the concepts, right? We need to express our voice, but we don't know how. And so the 12 concepts can inform the members in the fellowship on how to do that. So it's interacting with the service structure, interacting amongst each other within that structure. And hopefully the area idea allows more of us, through your GSR, to take the individual group's conscious, informed group conscious, we can talk about what that might mean, to an area assembly. So, like in DFW, we've got 63 meetings. So ideally we have 63 group service representatives. They're going to meet in an area assembly. We're going to look at the fellowship's business motions that come to us around the July timeframe. So groups discuss it. GSRs take it to the area assembly and discuss it. So that way, all of us ideally can have our voice heard. And then the area delegate will take it to Houston in October to vote on the motions.
Yeah. The first one that it really happened for us, I'm the area chair for Area 40. Again, we split the Bay Area into a number of different areas. So my area covers, I think we're up to maybe 20 or 21 meetings now. And so all the motions to be voted upon at the conference, we gave that to our GSRs and told them to bring that to their meetings and discuss, and have the GSRs bring that back to the assembly. And it worked really, really well the first year. I think the second time we tried it, it was a little bit more difficult because of the pandemic. Even though we're all on Zoom, the participation level was a lot lower, and it was harder to get the communication that we needed without being around each other in person. I remember sitting after a meeting with a couple of the guys in my group, and we discussed like all these different things, and I'm leaning this way, I'm leaning that way, and kind of the informed decision of the group. We carried that over to the area assembly where the various GSRs discussed things and let our delegate know which way we wanted things to vote on. And with the caveat that if he heard things to the contrary of how we informed him, that he would use his best decision to put his vote in at the conference.
Yeah, absolutely. And that kind of speaks to the right of decision to a degree, right? And which concept is that? That's concept 3. The concept 3, 4, and 5 are kind of the rights, kind of the spiritual concepts, if you will, right of decision, right of participation, and the right of appeal. Kind of highlight those 3 concepts. And I was listening. I didn't go to Atlanta to the convention here last weekend. But I zoomed in for some of those hybrid meetings, and one of the things I like to hear is the state of the fellowship. Paul M., the ISO director, does that each year, and one of the things that he was talking about was just the size of our fellowship, which is interesting. So I don't know if you knew this, but we've got 2,112 Sex Addicts Anonymous meetings, and we've got 40 more. So 2,152. Those 40 are in prisons, which is really cool. So 2,152, I'm sure it's plus or minus a few, but Sex Addicts Anonymous meetings. And of those meetings, we've got 87 areas, and so again, ideally we should have 2,152 GSRs, right? But unfortunately, we don't. I think there's a record of about 475 registered group service representatives with the ISO, and that works out to be a 20%-ish, number. And so again, that really speaks to the voice of this fellowship. Is the voice of the fellowship being heard, and are the groups expressing their voice? If I don't have a GSR, the voice isn't going to be heard. So we're just going to be a little meeting on the corner, right? I've got 3 meetings in McKinney, Texas. And if we don't have a GSR, we're just going to be a little meeting that meets once a week or 3 times a week in McKinney, and that's all we're going to be, right? We're not going to connect with the larger fellowship. And so I think clearly what that number means is that we got a lot of work to do in this fellowship, Jason, to look at service and to participate and to have our voice expressed. What are the 75% of the meetings who aren't doing this doing?
Yeah. I'll mention that with our area, one of the things that we did was we got a couple of us to canvass the various meetings in our area and talk about the distinction between intergroup and an area. And the intergroup, kind of focuses more on things in our immediate groups, but the area is for world service and
business. It's the business of our fellowship. It's expressing the voice, the needs, and so without a GSR, I can't bring the voice of my meeting up to the higher level, and I'm probably not receiving. We talked about an informed group conscience in this concept. Well, what does that mean? Well, it means I need to kind of have some information. What's going on, and there's several ways to hear that, right? Are the members of the meeting receiving, are they registered, are they receiving emails from the ISO? If we don't have a registered GSR, it's that person's not receiving the information that would be going out to all the meetings. So again, I don't know what I don't know. And if the meeting's not aware of this or getting this information, they don't know any different, right? So we have our work cut out for us, Jason, and what can we do to get this out? One of the tools of this podcast, right, is to get the word out.
Yeah.
And a lot of the questions I get, around these concepts, Darren, I just like the steps, I know the traditions. I don't need that other stuff. It's what does it mean to me, right? And so if we can, as a fellowship, make this personal to the individual sitting in the chair of our home groups, we're going to have a hard time. We're doing a decent job with the steps, right? Most of us know the steps, and hopefully the majority of the people in our home groups are working the steps, but it starts with that. Again, on page 5 of our green book, chapter 1, it says I've got a disease that consists of three issues, right? Body, mind, and spirit. Where I've got a 3-part disease, and that ties into the 3 legacies, if you will: recovery, unity, service. I treat my sick mind, right, with recovery via the 12 steps, and I treat my sick body, and I take my sick body to the fellowship, to the meetings. I'm unified with that around the traditions. And I treat my sick spirit with service, right? And so if I can get involved in all 3 of those areas, good chance I'm going to find a reasonable solution to the disease. But that takes teaching. And who's going to do the teaching? Well, I think it starts with sponsorship. Because I didn't know. If I'm new, I don't know about the steps. Certainly don't know about the traditions. And, I certainly don't know about 12 concepts. And so, one of the roles as a sponsor, I think, is to teach all 36 of those spiritual principles.
Yeah. The documentation that you sent me over, I was thinking about how I can teach that in relation. So, we're talking about world service, but, it comes down to like our business meetings.
Yeah, and notice, I just want to make one little statement. It's the 12 concepts of SAA service, not 12 concepts of world service. The AA concepts, they use the idea of, we specifically didn't use that because, I'm not involved in world service, so they don't apply to me. That mindset. But if we just talk about the 12 concepts of SAA service, because that applies, and we need to teach everybody can apply these 12 principles in their home group. Right?
Yeah.
And we're already doing it. We just don't know we're doing it for the most part.
Yeah. Language matters. Yeah. So just changing that simple word there changes an entire perspective. There were a couple of them, the informed decision, and you've got them there, so you can probably name off what I'm talking about here. But at our business meetings, what we usually do is anything that is going to radically change either our script or our format. We make a business proposal. We announce it at our meetings for a month before we vote on it. And so that's getting that message out there. When I first started, I remember being at a business meeting where we changed something at the business meeting that pissed a lot of people off. And because, there was just a handful of us at the business meeting, and the next meeting where it was apparent, they said, no, we don't like this change. And so the right to appeal was one of the concepts. And so the way we restructured it is where things that are going to be really changing a lot. We want to make sure that we announce it to the group for a month, and then they can come to the next business meeting if they are passionate about, whatever change is being proposed. And so, yeah, just informing everyone before making a change like that. And so a couple of these concepts here were really touching me on that level, just at my local group.
Yeah. So you can see how sometimes intuitively we do this, and sometimes, we don't recognize it as a specific concept, but again, these really aren't that complicated, just like the steps and traditions aren't complicated, but what comes to mind, if you want to get people to participate in business, make a decision without them, that impacts them, and all of a sudden you got people showing up to the business meeting, right? Gosh, this is a huge problem in our fellowship is just participation and showing up and being of service. In the various committees where I attend around the fellowship, this is a topic that just keeps coming up. We don't have enough people serving. We don't have enough people submitting service resumes. We've got these vacant spaces, and no one from those 2,152 meetings is showing up, which breaks my heart. So we can certainly do better. And again, it starts with communication and teaching and talking about it like we're doing here. What comes up when you were sharing what that experience was, concept, so you think of these concepts as delegation, communication, spiritual guidelines, a little bit of administrative stuff, leadership, are all kind of things that these things discuss. Concept 8 talks about, I'll read it, our service structure depends on effective and transparent communication throughout the fellowship, drawing on the spiritual principles, openness, acceptance, inclusivity, and mutual respect, right? And so your group that you're talking about, hey, here's what we're proposing to do. We've got a month to think about it. And, we're being open about it and come back in a month to discuss it. That's open communication. That's transparent communication. That's great. And those people that didn't show up or don't show up, well, they're delegating, right? Concept 2. SAA member groups delegate to their service boards and committees the authority necessary to fulfill the responsibilities assigned to them. The groups empower the conference to serve as the active voice and effective conscience of the whole fellowship. So again, we're talking about the whole fellowship here, but you can bring that back to your home group. Those who don't show up are delegating to the members who show up, right? Responsibility and authority and making decisions. I'm going to delegate those people to make a decision because I can't be there. That's these concepts and practically speaking at our home group.
Yeah, I won't go into the specific topic that happened today at our business meeting. I was mentioning to you earlier. At our noon meetings, we're lucky to have roughly 85 to 100 people per meeting. And then after the meeting's over, typically we have fellowship where people hang around and talk informally, a lot of crosstalk, various questions coming up. And so people have gotten used to sticking around after the meeting. We're kind of in a situation where we have a series of meetings, 7 meetings that meet at the same time each day. I guess our business meeting is kind of an intergroup of these 7 meetings. But today we were lucky to have, I think, probably 40 people left over on the business meeting.
That stayed for the business meeting. Wow.
Yeah. So, out of 85, a bunch of them dropped off.
And like an SAA record. That's amazing.
Yeah. And so the conversation, it got heated, but man, there were, we're on Zoom. So there's just hands raised, like 10 deep, and just people just really wanting to chime in on the subject. And some of them were a bit more vocal. Some of them were wanting clarification, but it was great that people were involved and passionate about this topic. And so we've come up with something that we're going to bring to the groups over the next month, and then we'll vote on it next month. But just to have that many people stick around and have this conversation was just an amazing thing that happened today. I was kind of bummed that I couldn't be more active. I was actually working, But had my earphones in and got to listen in on a lot of it, and then finally got my chance to chime in on a couple of things. But
Right.
just the informed decision, the right to appeal, just like all these things that are
Minority opinion
minority
vote,
opinion. Yeah.
that I just, again, I'm so reminded that all of us have this voice, and we need to hear from everybody.
Mm-hmm.
We need to hear from the loud people, and we need to hear from the quiet person in the corner.
Mm-hmm.
Because it all, new and old, we all have a right to express our voice. That may or may not mean a right to vote necessarily in certain circumstances, but we all get to participate at some level.
Mm-hmm.
And how cool is that, right? That you had that many people. Man, sometimes it's like pulling teeth to get people to participate.
Yeah. I've been at business meetings where it's been like 3 people, and it is so hard to get stuff done with that few people showing up. But yeah, I remember at one of our meetings where we would do regular service rotation. And I remember reading that in some of the information that you sent me as well, rotating service positions. And it was the same 4 people showing up at our business meetings. And so we weren't getting a lot of fresh blood in. And so we moved our elections of various positions into the body of the meeting. So everyone was there, and we actually did the actual business afterwards. But while everyone is in the room, it opened up a lot of new possibilities and fresh blood to get into doing service.
Yeah, it's great. It's such a monkey see, monkey do kind of fellowship, isn't it? And so I'm reminded I need to, again, if I want the folks that I'm trying to help or sponsor be of service, well, that means I need to be of service, because I can't tell you to do something if I'm not doing it. So, So it starts with me, and so I need to show up. I need to express my voice. I need to be heard. And I need to encourage the men that I sponsor to do the same. One of the things that we found helpful at our home group, typically we'll have a business meeting after the main meeting, but during the main meeting, we'll say, hey, we've got our business meeting. Here's a highlight of the agenda items. Who's committing to attend to discuss these items, right? And so hands will go up, and so all of a sudden there's a little bit of peer pressure there. It's like, oh, so people are going to participate. Maybe I need to participate. Am I missing out on something that speaks to that fear of missing out, right? But just being a demonstration of these principles and action, and the more we're communicating and talking about these opportunities, the more people, I think the more likely we're going to get people to show up. But again, that falls back to sponsorship. And as a sponsor, it's my job to teach these principles, steps, tradition, concepts to the folks that I sponsored. I got to admit, I'm just now starting to do that with these concepts, right? I've been around 12 years. You've been around a while. If you and I aren't doing it, who's doing it, Jason?
Yeah.
Right.
This conversation has given me whole new directions on how I sponsor, because, I traditionally will take someone through the steps, and that's the primary function of the sponsor. But once we start getting into carrying the message and other things, we start looking at traditions. But yeah, I have not communicated the concepts to any of my sponsees. Right. So they've kind of elevated my level of what I need to do to step up my game as a sponsor.
That's awesome. Poking you. Yeah. And so once we know better, we can do better, and I didn't know, and I didn't have a sponsor that was able to teach me about these things. And, I've got a disease that's with me all the time. And so I got to continue to grow spiritually. Right. And so, I've got plenty to learn, and that speaks to where can we find these things, right? Well, we talked about the service website, and this draft version is on there, but we also have a longer 32-page document, which is kind of a discussion and history of this process and of these concepts. And so you take just the bulletized list, then we go into an expansion of, hey, here's kind of what it practically means. Here's some examples, of how it applies. So that's what SAA is trying to provide. The other fellowships that have been around a while, Jason, have some other resources. Again, this all came from the original fellowship, Alcoholics Anonymous, and their concepts came around 1962. They started around 1935 to 39, right? And so it took them from 39 to 62 to get all 36 of their principles in place. And us, 1977 to 2022, was that 40 plus years. And other fellowships, like I said, have their own concepts. And this committee has been studying all of them. A lot of people think, let's just use AA's concepts, but we're different, and we don't want to just copy. And we want to stand on our own feet and have it meaningful to us. Because I'm not in that fellowship. We're grateful. Our literature talks about how grateful we are to get those steps and traditions. But we're just making it our own because our structure is different.
I was going to say there are a couple of the concepts here that are around the conference, the charter, and other things like that, where when I start reading it, I go a little bit cross-eyed. I understand it, but it talks more about the structure of how the ISO board of trustees, the conference, how all of those are structured. Can you address some of those?
I look at concept 6. The conference acknowledges that the board of trustees holds primary responsibility for fiduciary, legal, administrative actions of the International Service Organization. Again, that speaks to, delegating responsibility from the individual in the meetings to the kind of next entity down the upside down triangle structure. Because the 80, 100 people on your Zoom call really couldn't do that effectively, right? They can't manage the budget. They can't make those kind of decisions. And so we have to delegate certain things. But, these concepts are giving kind of guidance to our structure, informing the structure, informing the board of trustees, kind of what their role is and what they're being asked to do. And again, we're having responsibility and authority. And unfortunately, people see the word board of trustees, I think, well, that doesn't apply to me. Well, again, bring it down to your local group, the secretary, the treasurer, right? We're delegating to these people, and they're the treasurer is managing the budget and the secretary's doing other administrative roles. And one of the concepts talks about our paperwork, if you will, right? Our spiritual paperwork, bylaws and charter. But again, the majority of our members, what do the bylaws mean to me? I don't care about the charter. I just want to recover from sex addiction. But a home group could have operating procedures. A home group has an opening and closing script, right? That's kind of guiding paperwork, if you will, kind of informs the members on how to participate, how to share, what to do and not to do at times. Maybe a group has bylaws, an intergroup might have bylaws. So we have this important paperwork, which again is helpful. It makes us more effective in our service work. So we're not always having to reinvent the wheel. It can teach members on what to do, how to do things. So again, all of this applies at the group level.
Yeah. Being able to relate it to the group level makes it a lot easier to grasp. So when I was reading all of that information, I was just focused on the business meetings that I was having. I look at our local intergroup and see how these apply to that as well. And so it made it a lot more relatable for me.
Absolutely. Because if I can't relate to it, why do I care? And one of the challenges with these concepts is to make it relatable and get it down to the individual sitting in a chair in those 2,000 plus meetings around the world. Who's going to do that? Well, as the chair of the 12 concept committee, it's not going to be me that does it, right? It's going to be the individual sponsors, the GSRs in that group are going to go to that group and, they're going to go, hey, folks, we got these 12 concepts that we're being asked to read and provide feedback on and study. And, we're going to be asked to vote on these at some point, and if they want to participate, they'll participate. If they don't, they're going to delegate it to the other people that want to participate. And that's in line with these concepts. They can do that. They can participate or not, but that's how this is going to get out there.
When you mentioned the service site, do you know if these are before or after the member site?
So it's password protected.
So I will talk to you after we're done recording here on what I should share in terms of links and stuff. So we have a lot of local intergroup websites. For us here in the Bay Area, it's bayareasa.org. There is the overall website that the ISO runs, SAA-recovery.org. And then the service site is SAA-ISO.org. And that's where a lot of the stuff that I look at in terms of registration forms for GSRs, how to get information on what's being voted upon at the conference, and other things, what the areas look like around the world. There's a map that you can take a look at.
Yeah.
There's a lot of stuff on that website that I had no idea was there until it was mentioned at one of the conventions. A lot of the workshops at the conventions, some of them are around service. And so that's when I first found out about the service site.
Yeah, it's great information there, and we need to be talking about it, making announcements, and making it accessible, and communicate, Jason. And teach.
Yeah.
Teach the steps, traditions, and concepts to the folks we sponsor. And if everybody in this fellowship were to do that, I think we'd be a much different fellowship, right? It would be more than 2,000 meetings if we were all kind of doing this a little bit differently, perhaps, getting out of the comfort of our little group on the corner and participating in the broader fellowship and structure, because there's power to all of that stuff. Steps, fellowship. Again, I got a program, I got a fellowship, and I got service, and all those things. And if all of us did that, man, we'd be probably more effective at carrying our Sex Addicts Anonymous message, right?
Yeah.
Super exciting.
Yeah.
Haven't been bored once in 12 years, I say, Jason, trying to stay involved in all those areas, right? If you're bored, give me a call. Right. Let's talk about what we can do.
Yeah, definitely. Were there any other things that you wanted to cover before we wrap this one up?
Well, I just want to, again, the 12 Concept Committee is open to anybody, right? Again, we've been meeting since 2015. I've just been meeting for a few years, but we've had so many longtime members from every level of service, from just your general member to board members to LitCom members to conference steering committee members to directors, former direct, so there's been a lot of experience, strength, and hope that's been poured into this draft document. The committee is committed to provide our best draft to the fellowship. You'll probably see a updated draft at the October conference, which we're probably going to say, hey, here it is. Let's put some, review it for a year, and we'll bring it up for a vote shortly, maybe the year after that. But so again, do me a favor, right? Read this, download this, read it at your home group, right? Read the steps, traditions, concept, read the concept of the month, right? A lot of groups read the tradition of the month. Well, download this little 2-page document and go, hey, concept 6, concept of the month, here it is. Maybe there can be some discussion about it, but at least you're reading it, introducing it, putting it in people's minds, like, oh, wow, we got concepts too.
Yeah. You've just
not doing it in your home group. We need help. I need help. The committee needs help, and so I'm making a direct ask from the fellowship here, Jason. Go to the website, download these draft concepts, and start bringing it up in your area, intergroup, local meeting.
Yeah, you've just given me a lot to think about and to bring up at my local meetings that I go to.
Yeah, my home group started doing it recently, and it brings up thoughts and questions, and hey, what are those, and where can I find them? And so I'm going to start teaching them in a group environment, like we teach the traditions to the folks that we sponsor, formally after the steps. And now we're going to try to, again, do this in a group. It's more fun in a group setting to discuss this and talk about these things. I find a lot of us work steps individually with a sponsor, but traditions and concepts are a lot of fun to do in a group environment. And so do that, invite everybody and watch our fellowship grow.
Yeah.
There's a lot to talk about.
Yeah.
Maybe we can get together again and dissect it further. So.
Yeah, definitely. And thank you for reaching out to me to approach this as a topic here for the podcast. And, I'm really grateful that we're finally able to get this together and do it.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm reminded that nothing happens in our spare time, right? We didn't purposely do that, right? And here we are. So appreciate it.
All right. Well, I thank you so much for joining us here on this episode.
Thanks, Jason.
All right. I'll talk to you soon.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Such a great conversation. I really appreciate Darren coming here on the podcast and talking about this. And maybe in the future, we might discuss some of the different traditions or focus in on a couple of the key concepts to further our understanding. Anyway, I'm super grateful for Darren coming out here and sharing that. So way back at the beginning of the podcast, I did mention that I wanted to talk about the various SAA websites. The main website, which is run by the ISO, or International Service Organization, is SAA-recovery.org. And we talk about that a lot here on the podcast. There's lots of different sections of that. During our conversation, we also talked about the service site, which is SAA-ISO.org. And that has a lot more of the business aspect. Some of it is open to the public and others is for members, where you will need the username and password. And you can get that if you are interested. You can email me for that at jason@sexaddictsrecoverypod.com and I can provide that. Or you can email the ISO at info@saa-recovery.org and they would be happy to provide that. But it has been such an amazing site for me to look up information about how the ISO works when I'm looking to register group service representatives and general GSR information, area information, or further details on things that will be voted on in the conference in October. All of that information is there, lots of other stuff as well. So please check that out if you're interested. I'll be leaving links in the show notes for a lot of these, both on the SAA-recovery.org site and the service site, SAA-ISO.org. There are registration forms for getting groups registered with the ISO, registering group service representatives. Besides that, there are a lot of other forms, but I will put those direct links if you are interested in that. And lastly, I wanted to talk about their brand new website called SAA Connect, and the URL is saa-connect.org. And I've been hearing about this for a few years. It's been something that has been in the works, and there's some really cool stuff on there. Eventually, there'll be a member area where each member can log in with their own personal ID, and I think I've heard that there might be blog information, and I'll be posting stuff there about the podcast. But currently, there's lots of information about SAA. The audio section is amazing. So it's got a lot of the audio from past conventions, both speakers and workshops, things like that, that are available for listening right now. The featured audio that I'm seeing is from the 2007 Saturday Banquet by Jeannie O. We featured Jeannie O on the podcast in episode 27, where she spoke at the SAA and COSA speaker meeting, and she was the first woman in SAA. So anyway, at SAA Connect currently, and I'm not sure how often they will rotate this, but her speaking at the Saturday Banquet in 2007 is the featured audio. There are ways of searching for other audio recordings by category, by tag, by name. There's a sobriety calculator there, voices of recovery, tools of recovery, all the newsletters, the outer circle is there. So there's a lot of really cool stuff. It just opened up a few weeks ago, so I have not had the chance to fully check it out, but it looks really awesome. So I will be spending more time exploring that. And again, I will leave a link for that in the show notes as well. So I think that will about wrap up this episode. Again, haven't had a lot of brand new feedback, so I'm going to withhold reading any comments from the YouTube channel and any other reviews that we might have gotten on Apple Podcasts or iTunes. So I will hold those for another day. Next week, I do not have a guest currently lined up, so I will either be recording a short episode next week or taking the week off. Haven't quite decided that yet. But yeah, that's all I have for this episode. So yeah, if you did want to provide feedback for the podcast, you can reach us at feedback@sexaddictsrecoverypod.com. And again, if you wanted to reach out to me personally to be a guest here on the podcast, or if you have any questions, you can reach me at jason@sexaddictsrecoverypod.com. And again, that's all I have for this week. Thanks for tuning in. And as always, keep coming back. The views and opinions contained in the Sex Addicts Recovery Podcast are those of the participants and do not necessarily reflect those of the Bay Area Intergroup or the ISO of SAA.